I am rolling. Go for claps.
Here you go. I'm going to give you 3.5.
There's no hat.
1, 2, 3, and then...
That's not 3.5 claps. That's 4 claps.
No, that last one was just me flicking one finger on the palm of my hand.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's
always a round number, and I wanted to do something different.
You're trying to be creative with these claps all the time, but they're not supposed to be creative. They're just supposed to be so I can synchronize stuff. Okay?
Everything can be creative.
I guess you need to express your creativity in every possible venue that you can. But in the meantime, 3 claps from me. There we go.
Yeah,
3 claps.
3. Yeah, nice and functional. They were very functional. Shall we?
A half clap is taking your own hand and just closing it on itself. If there's going to be a half clap, that's a half clap, not flicking your other palm with a finger.
No, technically, a half clap would be just using one hand. Shall we start by wishing a happy new year to all the Hello Internet listeners in our first podcast of 2015.
Yes.
Our first podcast ever that is not in the year 2014.
It is almost, I guess, a year anniversary for us because we started in January sometime last year. I'd have to look it up.
Did we start in January?
Well, now you're going to make me look it up. I think we started, I'm going to say it was like January 30th was our first episode, something like that.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we've been doing this that long.
Yeah, this is almost like a year now.
Wow.
I'm so good. January 31st, 2014 was...
Oh, you said January 30, so technically you were wrong.
Let's not do this. Let's not do this, Bray.
I'm not going to pretend to wish you a happy new year because we do not lie to our listeners. And we saw in the new year together.
Yes, we did. You invited the missus and I out for New Year's Eve in London because you were here for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And the 2 wives and us all went out to dinner and rung in the new year. You made me stay up late, which is not something that I normally really want to do.
You sprung some voodoo witchcraft on me as well because you were running a bit late for dinner. Uh-huh. And I was like, where are you, man? Where are you? And then you sent me this weird text where I had to accept something. And you know I hate accepting things I don't understand. But then I got to watch a little CGP grey symbol move around on a map and I could follow you crossing bridges and walking around London. It was amazing. Mm-hmm.
This is one of the new features of iOS 8 is the ability to temporarily share your location with somebody else. So these are the reasons why when you get that red update badge on your iPhone, you might want to click it because then I can do things like send you my location for the next hour so you can see how close we are to actually making it across the demilitarized zone of London where they shut down the inner part of the city. And there's police checks and dogs and all kinds of crazy stuff to get in. And you can see us trying to traverse this area and getting closer to you. So that's why you want to upgrade to the new stuff.
It was good fun. And then you crossed the bridge and I was and I love bridges. And I was watching you get closer to it. And then I could screen capture the moment that you were actually on the bridge. And it was brilliant.
Yes, you were very excited by this. So if we're meeting up in the future, I'll try to always remember to share my location as I am approaching.
Why can't I just have it all the time? Just as a little security blanket, just to know where you are.
I'm not willing to extend that level of intimacy in our relationship at this stage, or probably ever, Brady. I don't want you following my location 24 hours a day.
What places do you go that you wouldn't want me to know about?
That's not the point. It's just if you're sharing your location, with someone, it feels a bit like God is looking down upon you from the sky all the time. I don't like it. It feels almost claustrophobic to have your location tracked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's why I don't do it.
What was it like for that 15 minutes or so when you said, okay, I'm going to share my location with Brady just so he knows how close I am to dinner? Uh-huh. Does that change the way you walk or are you conscious of that eye in the sky for those 15 minutes when you're scurrying along the bridge trying to get to me before dinner starts?
No, of course not, because I view that as a courtesy. This is the more modern equivalent of sending text messages every few minutes. Oh, I'm approaching the bridge. Oh, I've crossed the bridge. I'll be right there. Oh, I'm right here right now. You don't have to send those text messages. You can just see where I am. And I've done this before. They used to have a little bit more awkward way that you could do it. When I go traveling or on a business trip or to the Random Acts of Intelligence show this summer, then I'll share my location with my wife so she knows where I am and doesn't have to worry about what's going on. Then it's different. Then I'll share my location, but not normally.
But what about when we went into those caves in Alabama? Like, she probably couldn't follow you then, and she would have been worried. Like, you went to a cave with gun-toting Destin, and then you disappeared off the map. That would just make her more worried.
Well, these are the trade-offs. Sometimes you can disappear off the map, and that's fine. That's fine. Maybe they should get Wi-Fi in that cave. That's what they should do.
They should. Did you enjoy dinner? It was one of those kind of taster menu things where they bring you out lots of little delicacies, wasn't it? And some of it was pretty London.
Why don't you tell people what you mean by pretty London?
It was all like, posh names that we didn't understand, like booby zoos eve, and it's like flavoured frothy air and, like a shot glass of foam followed by some piece of meat the size of a 5-pence coin.
So I was a little bit worried when you first sent me the details about this dinner, because it was some multi-course dinner. I've never done this before, and I assumed that they meant actual meals for the different courses. Like they were going
7 full meals.
Yeah, well, this is what I was wondering. Is this Roman style? We're just going to be stuffing ourselves until we can't possibly eat, and they keep bringing food, and it's just more and more delicious every step of the way. And you're just like, oh God, by midnight you're about ready to burst. That was not the case. What they actually do is bring you tiny portions of overly fancy food spread out over a long period of time. But I was shocked at how small these portions were. And so if anybody is ever in the situation where they're saying, oh, we're going to have a 14-course meal for you, don't worry. You're just going to get thimble-sized bits of food for several hours. You're not going to be overstuffed. So.
It was fancy pants food, though. Like, it was, I have been to one of these before at quite a famous restaurant in Nottingham, and my friend had been to it, and it was even more. It was something like 14 courses, and my friend who'd previously been told me that him and his wife had gone to McDonald's on the way home because they felt like they hadn't had enough food. So I went to that one thinking, oh, okay, this is, But I found the food really rich and filling, and likewise at ours on New Year's Eve, like I wasn't hungry at the end. Like I felt like I'd had enough food because it's quite rich, that food they bring you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't feel this way. Did you get a McDonald's on the way home? You can tell me.
No, we didn't. I didn't get a McDonald's on the way home.
Did you get anything on the way home?
I'm trying to remember. I think maybe we did eat something when we got home. I don't remember exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I feel bad now.
It was a very small amount of food. I was surprised. I had no idea what to expect.
Well, that's what I mean. Fancy pants London. I assure you it didn't cost the same as a small amount of food.
Yes, I'm sure. Tiny amounts of food, you're going to spend an enormous amount of money. Yeah. But you can buy an enormous amount of ramen noodles for very little money. So that it's like the volume of food is inversely proportional to its price. That is a rule of the universe, I think.
Do you enjoy New Year's Eve? Is it a fun night for you, or historically, or
in terms of times I have stayed up until the midnight rollover? This is very few in my whole life.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm not a stay up until midnight kind of guy.
You're asleep at midnight sometimes.
I slept through the 1999 to 2000 changeover.
No.
Yes, I did.
I don't think I've ever slept through a changeover, let alone that one. I was working through that one, but I don't. Wow.
What were you doing working through it?
I was a journalist, so it was like all hands to the pump at my newspaper in case
airplanes are falling out of the sky and the internet shuts down, right?
In case the world ended and that, but we were completely overstaffed, so really I was just wandering around the centre of Adelaide, and I don't think I actually had to do any work, but I was technically at work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, wow, you slept through that one. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever slept through one. It's like you just don't do that.
I don't know. I find New Year's is a strange holiday. I'm not. To be clear, I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm not. Oh, I don't. This holiday is uninteresting. You need holidays in the middle of winter because it's a depressing time otherwise. But I find because I have never had a job that is well, I guess until now, but a job that is just a year-round kind of job. Like I went to school. And then from school, I went into teacher training. And then from teacher training, I went into being a teacher. My notion of years is still based on the academic year. So I feel like, oh, the new year starts in September. And so that's why I feel like my mind has always been a bit off kilter from New Year's Eve. Is I feel like, oh, it should be in the summer, maybe the New Year's Eve takes place. I think that this changeover is a strange time for the calendar to change over. I know why it happens for historical reasons. Please, people, don't write me emails. But it doesn't sync up with my notion of when things happen, or when I try to think backwards in time. I'm always thinking in terms of academic years. I'm not thinking in terms of calendar years. So that's why
I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and assume you're not a big fan of New Year's resolutions then.
Well, no, I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions, but I feel like that is separate from the New Year's holiday. I think New Year's resolutions are dumb and ineffective for the most part. But do you make New Year's resolutions, Brady? Have you made New Year's resolutions?
I don't normally. I've only really seriously done it once with any kind of effectiveness, but...
Can you share what your one effective one was?
It was like a big fitness, weight loss sort of regime thing where I thought, okay, I'm going to be really disciplined about it. And, got into all like that, hardcore calorie counting and stuff like that. But I do totally understand them, and I think I see a lot of merit to them. Like, I understand the psychology of them. That kind of clean slate mentality really works for me. That because I'm, we've brought it up before with the swearing thing. I'm quite a fan of like streaks and things like that. And once you break a streak, I sort of, I lose interest a bit. And if you've got something you want to do, like say not eat cheeseburgers,
right?
Like, I'm never going to do that because I'm always going to think, well, I've eaten cheeseburgers and I ate one 3 days ago, so what's the point of not eating one now? But New Year is this really natural time to sort of be able to sort of reset back to zero and think almost like I've never eaten a cheeseburger, and you can start a streak. And of course, when January 3 comes and you eat a cheeseburger, then you've ruined it, and then you may as well eat 100 more. But I do think it gives you this kind of natural time to reset the counter to zero and pretend you've never eaten one before. And I think that's what it is with most things. I think it's just this natural reset, which I know is completely arbitrary. Of course, I understand that, but I get it. I do totally get it. It was always a very magical moment, that click over of the calendar. Even as like a little kid, I remember we'd stay up if we were allowed to. Like, my sister and I would stay up till midnight, and then as soon as the new year started, it was this magical thing, and we would run around and do everything. Like, I'm the first person to touch this tree in 1984. I'm the first person to flush the toilet in 1984. I'm the first person to pat the dog in 1984. I'm the first person to do it. And like, it was like, you were like this pioneer and everything was new. And of course you grow out of that.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I didn't go running around at midnight the other night and start touching trees and stuff. But that does still linger in your head. Like, it's a little... I get the whole fresh start thing. And I can see why someone like of your disposition would be, would think this is completely irrational, but I get it.
It's not that it's... I would say, it's not that it's irrational. It's just that it holds no... it doesn't pull on my mind in any particular way. I am just New Year's Eve neutral. It doesn't affect me. Whereas like Christmas, I just like Christmas, and there's no rational reason why. I just do. It just pulls on my mind in this particular way. Or like Thanksgiving, like, oh, what a nice holiday Thanksgiving is. It just is. But New Year's Eve, it does not pull on my mind in this way. And so yes, that's why I don't often bother staying up for it, because I'm also just terrible at staying up late anyway. And as it has done, I know that when I do it, it totally messes with my sleep schedule for a very long time. And so that's another reason why I don't like to do it, is that I find it's staying up late at all then cascades into a staying up late, waking up late spiral of productivity doom. And so that's why I'm also not always super into New Year's.
Is there a CGP Grey equivalent of New Year's resolutions? Like, for so many people, New Year is the time that they'll join the gym or get fit or stop smoking. Like, that's their arbitrary point to say, okay, from this point on, I'm going to get my act together. Do you have an equivalent? Do you have some weird lines in the sand or life points or moments that you can use as jump offs to a new and improved, upgraded you?
Yeah, well, I've talked about this a little bit before, But I am a big believer in I don't know how to put this, but I guess I like systems more than I like goals, would be the way
Hmm.
to put it. I'm not a huge believer in goals, but I am a huge believer in system. I have two levels of reviews that I do. The ones that I think are probably closest to a New Year's Eve kind of thing is I do a relatively big review every 3 months where I'm kind of looking at, okay, what is the situation in my life? What are things that I want to be better? What are things that I want to improve? And over the past few months, what has worked in my life and what hasn't worked in my life? And I consciously take some time out to think about that kind of stuff. Like, it's not like a huge deal. This isn't, an afternoon of I have a couple of documents, some outlines that I use to keep track of this stuff.
Is it regimented by date though? Like, is it the end of the calendar month? Like, I'll always do this on the last Thursday of the month, or do you just kind of say, "Oh, it's been about 3 months. Let's open the document."
I have a little reminder that pops up every 3 months in OmniFocus. So there's. Why is that funny? Why is that funny?
Just, I don't know. It just amuses me that you have this reminder every 3 months going off saying, "Sit down and review your life."
Well, the reminder is actually to then create an instance of a template of all the things that I like to do during that 3 month review. So that's what the reminder is. The reminder pops up when it says run quarterly life review template, which then I do, and it pre-populates it with, I don't know, I think 10 or so little things that I like to run through on the review. So that is the mechanics of it. That's kind of what happens. But I like 3 months because I think it's a conceivable amount of time. Like a year is almost too long as a human to really think about. But I feel like you can get a decent sized project done in 3 months if you really want to. Or you can make a reasonable amount of progress in something like personal fitness in 3 months if you really want to. But a year, it's like, particularly if you're thinking about health goals, like there's a lot of progress a person could make in a year with health goals. But then it's also that your goal is so far away. It's like, this cheeseburger today doesn't matter, right? I can eat this. In a year, I'll be looking great. But right now, I can do this other thing.
I don't think New Year's resolutions are necessarily all about, here's my goal and I'll reassess how I did next New Year's Eve. I just think I think New Year's resolutions are the time that people say, okay, from this day onwards, the 1st of January, I'm going to implement, System X, as you would call it,
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think necessarily that people are thinking about it in the same way. I'm just talking about, why don't I do a yearly review system? Because I almost think it's too big of a chunk of time.
Yeah.
It's not a reasonable chunk of time to try to think about stuff.
So when you sit down in the afternoon and look at these points in this template or whatever it is, and then you spit out some result, what do? Does this then result in like little tweaks and changes to your life, or do you then say, okay, it's time to implement Plan Z, and like what happens after this afternoon review?
One of the biggest levers for change is trying to tinker with my daily schedule and my daily habits and what do I do. And I feel like this has actually been a very big project for me ever since I became self-employed, I guess 2 years ago now, is trying to figure out how to make this work in a reasonable way. How to make things happen like in both my professional life and in my personal life in a way so that like my work life doesn't totally consume everything else. That just comes down to like, okay, well, how much time am I going to spend on various things? When am I going to try to do those things? And it sounds silly, but it takes a long time to kind of learn about yourself and realize, what works and what doesn't work. So I would say that those reviews, the biggest actionable outcome from them is things like adjustments in my schedule of when am I going to attempt to do certain kinds of work and when am I going to not attempt to do other kinds of work.
Is a change to the famous CGP Grey daily schedule like a big event? Is it like changing the Google homepage? It's such a big deal? Or is this something that's constantly being changed, like a little algorithm?
Yeah, no, this is just constant. Also, I always want to be clear with people. I blow past my schedule on a very regular basis. But one of the things that I try to pay attention to is like, why does this happen? Why is it that on some days I just seem totally incapable of getting into the groove of the schedule, and other days things work. And I think we've talked about this once before, but like a thing I eventually tuned into is like my breakfast needs to be really consistent, because not having things go really smoothly just during breakfast time is a very high predictor of the rest of the day going haywire. And I don't know why that is. It sounds like it's ridiculous, but that's just something that I've noticed. So that's kind of, these review times are a good time for me anyway, to try to think about how it is that I work and what is effective and what is not effective. So that, I guess that's the closest thing that I have to something like a New Year's Eve, but it is really every 3 months that I do this self review.
Wow, so you get 4 New Year's Eves a year.
Yes, but I don't have to stay up until midnight on any of them, because that would be terrible.
Right.
Don't you review your life, Brady? Don't you? What do you do? Like, just once a year you think about, I'm not going to eat cheeseburgers, and you make it all the way until January 3rd, and then you wait until next year? I mean, is that your system?
I don't know. Yeah, that's probably not as far removed as I would like it to be, but I don't know. I mean, suffice to say, it is nothing like your system.
But you must do some kind of long-term planning. Or maybe not.
No, I don't really think I do. I just I don't know. It just kind of...
So you're just going down the stream of life and seeing where it takes you?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. Like, yeah, and then things happen and you react to them. And there are things I'd like, and then something comes up and you think, you start seeing things further ahead along the stream, and you think, do you know what? I could probably achieve this or do that, and then you'll make it happen. Mm-hmm. But like, you might see a nice tree up ahead and it's on the other side of the river, so you make sure you start paddling over to the left so you'll get to that tree. Mm-hmm. But I definitely don't treat life like you do. Like, things just come along and I just react to them and make the most of them. And, it's not like I wake up in the morning and think, I wonder what career I'm going to have today. Like I do plan things.
Right.
But I'm definitely not like you.
Hello, Internet. This episode is brought to you by, of course, the one, the only, the Squarespace. There are a huge number of reasons you might want to try Squarespace, but the one that I think is the most convincing reason is I use Squarespace. I use Squarespace for the Hello Internet website, and I use Squarespace for cgpgrey.com, and I cannot tell you how much hassle this has removed from my life. I used to try to run the websites by myself. I used to try to build them and maintain them, and I highly recommend that if you're the kind of person who thinks, ooh, I could do this, let me try it. Don't. Not unless you want to do this for a full-time living, where you spend half of your day trying to upgrade some script on your server because of a security problem, or you're trying to maintain 1,000 plugins for whatever system you're using. It's an enormous hassle, and it frankly isn't worth it, because like most people, you want a website to do something. You want to put your articles on it. You want to put your podcast on it. You don't want to spend half of your day worrying about the website itself. And that's what Squarespace gives you. It gives you peace of mind. Now, I will say this is a particularly good time to try out Squarespace, because they have just rolled out their brand new Squarespace 7 interface, which, if you thought Squarespace was easy to use before, it is even easier now with Squarespace 7. I've been using it a lot. I switched over all of my websites to Squarespace 7. I like it. It's very, very simple. It's very easy to use. And so this is a great time to get in on the ground floor if you want to make your own website. So the bullet points: Squarespace is beautiful. It's simple. It's powerful. They have 24/7 support to help you out whenever you need it at any time, anywhere in the world. So go to Squarespace, start a trial with no credit card required, build your website today, and when you want to sign up to use Squarespace for real, for the super cheap price of only $8 a month, use the offer code HELLO to get 10% off your first purchase and to show support for our podcast. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere.
A big thing in the UK that probably people outside the UK won't know about is a couple of days before New Year's Eve every year, they announce something called the New Year's Honours List. And this is a list of, I don't know, it's up to around 1,000 people, maybe over 1,000 people that are going to receive, honours, funnily enough. And these can be things that I guess most people won't understand. All these weird titles like CBEs and MBEs and OBEs. And these...
Just to be clear here, who is giving out these honors?
Well, there is confusion about this, but essentially 99.9% of them are decided basically by the government, a government committee.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the honours are actually given out, they're kind of given out in the name of the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually the Queen or a member of the royal family who hands them over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of you're getting an honour from the Queen. But it's not the Queen or anyone in royalty who's deciding it. It's actually a government thing, and it's just symbolic that it's handed over by the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many things in British life, the Queen is more of a symbol. So a lot of people who are anti-monarchy sort of get in a bit of a tiz about honours and think it's all a big royal thing when obviously the link is there and the historic link is there, but it's not really a royal thing. Right. It's a political thing, which is probably even worse in some people's eyes.
Yes.
And obviously there's always a bit of controversy because there's always back scratching and favours going on.
So for people, if people have heard of anything, they've heard of knighthoods in the UK.
That is the top honour. That's the big one. If there's 1,000, say, about 980 of them will be these various lower honours, which are still very nice things to have. Mm-hmm. And then about 20 or 30 people will get a knighthood, and they will become sir if they're a man, or a damehood, and they will become a dame if they're a woman. And they're they're the big ones. So anyway, this year was very exciting for someone I'm very close to, and that is Professor Martin Polyakov, who is the frizzy-haired chemist who appears in a large majority of my periodic videos.
Yes.
I've been working with for many years now, was given a knighthood. Ooh. And he has now been upgraded from Professor Polyakov to Sir Martin.
Wow.
It was very exciting. I was lucky enough to find out a little bit early because a few people are allowed to find out early for obvious reasons, and we made a video that could be released the moment the announcement was made, so I had to know a little bit early. But on the, I think it was the 30th or late on the 29th, it was made public, and I could start tweeting and release the video, and really happy for Martin. I hasten to point out, before I say any more about it, Martin has been a very successful and accomplished chemist for many years, and it is for his services to chemistry.
I was going to ask what it was for.
So we must not. It was mainly for his services to chemistry. He's also for a few years now been a real ambassador for British science as the Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society.
Right. Well, he was the reason that you had to go to India a few weeks ago, is it not?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, this is true. But actually, if I call this up, I didn't have this ready. But the thing that was very interesting, and like when you get a knighthood, they give you a little write-up about why you're getting it. And so in Martin's write-up, it did say, and I don't know if this is the first, it did say, Professor Polyakov is an organic chemist whose work's been taken up by industry, etc., etc. He's a global leader in this type of chemistry, and his work in engaging the public with chemistry has been recognised internationally, including through the periodic table of videos on YouTube.
Ah.
So the YouTube videos actually got a mention in his official citation, and he was very excited by this and thought, I wonder if this is the first time that YouTube has been mentioned officially in a knighthood. I don't know, but
that's an interesting question. There must be somewhere that the text of all of these is available, so you could grep through that and find if YouTube was ever mentioned before.
Yeah,
someone should do that.
But anyway, so that was a nice. It was really nice for his work on the YouTube videos, and of course because the YouTube videos are kind of the most gimmicky thing about Martin.
Right.
That has been latched onto by the media. So there's been posters all around Nottingham said, YouTube prof gets knighthood, and the BBC website sort of had crazy haired YouTube prof gets knighthood. So he's sort of become this YouTube knight now. Mm-hmm. So although I think that's a bit naughty and slightly diminishes his accomplishments as a chemist, I've been a little bit cheekily happy to see it as well, because obviously the YouTube component is the only component to which I have any stake.
Right.
So it's brilliant, and so well done to Martin. I've written a bit about it on a blog, and there's a video, and if people want to find out any more about it, I'm sure Gray will link it off in the notes and stuff, but
I'll
really
put everything in the show notes. The other question then, of course, is did you get any kind of lesser title for your role in his YouTube fame? I think you should. A squirehood or something. I don't know what else to
people
think
have
about.
joked that does that make me like his squire? If you're the wife of a knight, you can take the title lady.
Mm-hmm.
And because Martin is kind of my YouTube husband, some people have said maybe I should take the name Lady Brady.
I like that. I like Lady Brady. That's good. That's very good. That's going to stick.
Yeah, but I think in the comments under the YouTube video, like loads and loads of people have been saying, you know, well done Martin, but well done Brady too, etc., etc. And I cannot emphasize enough that I do not think the YouTube thing is that large a component of why he's got a knighthood, but it has still been very flattering and nice.
Yes, but still, Lady Brady.
I was going to say one more. There was one more thing I wanted to say about it actually, and that was I have been making YouTube videos long enough and know what kind of YouTubey people are like well enough to have expected a little bit of pushback because of the whole honour system and whatnot. You know, people saying, "Oh, honours are rubbish." There has been surprisingly little of that. Much less than I anticipated, of people saying, "Oh, honours are rubbish."
Mm-hmm.
But there have been a few. And one thing I expected lots of people to cite, and a few people did, is the very famous and amazing Richard Feynman, who, in a YouTube clip that many people have watched, said that he does not like honours, and he does not agree with honours. He thinks they're rubbish. I'm very familiar with it. I've even used it in a video myself, that clip of Feynman saying that.
That's funny. I can't think of that off the top of my head. I totally love everything about Feynman, and I've read everything about him that I can, and I've watched every YouTube video I can possibly find of Feynman. I can't remember that one off the top of my head, so I'll be curious to see it.
It's a clip in that famous BBC interview he did. You know,
that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
It was in that show. Yeah, and sometimes you just can watch it in the show, and some people have isolated it. He talks about how his father used to make military uniforms, and it helped build up his resentment to honours. Anyway, it did get me thinking, because I love Richard Feynman too, and I could watch him for hours. But he was a guy who did play to type. You know, he was a performer, and I think he kind of did cultivate his kind of maverick image a little bit. And saying, I don't like honours is pretty cool. It did get me thinking, and I therefore looked this up, because obviously Feynman did win the Nobel Prize, and he did accept the Nobel Prize. He didn't say, "I don't want your fancy honours and your medal." He went over and to Stockholm and put on a tux and took the medal. So it made me think, well, how did he justify this? What did he say when he accepted the medal? And I went and looked up some speeches, and in particular a speech he gave at a banquet, the Nobel Prize banquet. And I really recommend people read it, because it puts a completely different twist on his attitude to honours. It does come across that he was sceptical about honours, but when he won this prize, lots of people started talking about his work, and it really inspired a lot of people. And the last thing he said at the end of this speech, and you can go and read it, it's on the Nobel Prize website, he said, "And so, you Swedish people with your honours and your trumpets and your king, forgive me, for I understand at last such things provide entrance to the heart. Used by a wise and peaceful people, they can generate good feeling, even love, among men, even in lands far beyond your own. And for that lesson, I thank you."
Oh.
And that thing that Feynman learned and talks about there, I have also seen. It's not just British people who've been commenting and saying how excited they are for Sir Martin. It's been people all around the world, people from the US saying, "I don't completely understand your honour system and how this works, but I'm so happy that Martin has become Sir Martin and he deserves it, and I've watched his videos for years and it makes me so happy." And I think we mustn't forget that about honours, that their abilities to sort of inspire and foster goodwill, if given properly and used well, they're not an all bad thing, no matter what you might think about politicians or monarchies and things. It's still, sometimes it's nice to see people we care about recognised publicly.
I agree.
One other little bit of New Year's news. Plane crash corner. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Amongst the good news, we have had a significant plane crash to end the year. By the way, a few people have been sending me stats and graphs and things showing that this year just ended was actually the best year on record for plane crash fatalities. It was actually a really good, safe year. So despite having some very famous, very high-profile, very unusual plane crashes, it was quite a safe year to be flying around. Presumably, this is not including before planes existed. I imagine they were very safe years for plane fatalities.
Yes. I imagine so as well.
But we did end with the Air Asia crash. Another one in that neck of the woods going missing in the sea. I think it was about 160 people on it. Do you know about this, do you? Or has this one got past the grey radar?
Dude, I don't hear about any of these plane crashes. This is not a question of like getting past the radar. I only hear about plane crashes when you tell me about plane crashes.
Is this the first you know of this then? You don't know there was another plane crash?
I know nothing of what you speak.
So you don't like once a day or something go onto something like the BBC website or CNN or someone just to see, what's the top story of the day?
Maybe this is something we can talk about slightly later. I've kind of taken a mini vacation from Christmas until just about now. During this period of time in particular, I have barely been on the internet at all. So I'm particularly unconnected to things. But in my normal daily life, no, I would
still
never
wouldn't do that. You wouldn't
up.
just say, just once I'll go onto just in the morning when I wake up, has there been a huge terrorist attack overnight, or has someone really famous died, or you don't think to check that?
I never go onto sites like CNN or the BBC just to check stuff. That is never part of my routine. It wouldn't even occur to me to be part of my routine.
Wow.
Again, if anything in my life serves that function, it would be going onto Reddit, which is usually something I don't do until the afternoon. And even then, like if you know what you're doing with settings, I curate my Reddit experience so that I'm not subscribed to things like world news or politics or any of these things. So I can miss quite a lot.
Maybe it's because I'm a journalist, right? And so many people in my life are journalists. But you seem like such an aberration to me. Like that seems freakish to me. That people exist that at no point will look at a newspaper, look at a news website. They won't watch the news at dinner time just to see what happened during the day. Like, I'm sure there are many people like you, and I'm the freak here. But to me, that seems absolutely extraordinary. And I know and it's well known on this podcast that you're not a big news follower.
Yeah.
But even hearing that now, that you won't even look at a news website during the day, amazes me.
Well, I think I'm in the minority here, given most people that I speak to. I do occasionally come across people like me, and then we feel like kindred spirits, and we can have conversations about
nothing, because you don't know anything. You don't watch the news. I don't watch the news either. What should we talk about?
Let's talk about how we don't watch the news.
Yeah.
It's a bit like in the early 2000s. If you didn't have a television, this was a thing that you could discuss with other people, because it was like, I don't own a television. Neither do you. Oh, boy, yes. Let's talk about how our lives are different because we don't own a television. Whereas now that's much more common because the internet and television have been merging together. But that used to be more of a thing. But yeah, so it's just funny that you mentioned it because, it would never even occur to me to go to CNN.com to see what had happened during the day, and I don't follow any of those kind of things on Twitter. But I think that's why, like, you can mention the AirAsia crash, and I find it's funny that you would even expect me to be aware of that, because that to me seems like, again, this is going to sound terrible because people have died, but in the grand scheme of the year, a relatively minor news event. Like, I imagine if you had to go back and pick the 10 biggest news stories from the year, that would not make the list.
No, it wouldn't even make the top 2 plane crashes. But yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm just saying it's like I find it surprising that you would think that I would be aware of it, and it's like no, there is no channel through which this would come into my life. As I've said before, if you CNN.com or the BBC, they have to fill a whole page worth of stuff on their website every day, no matter what's happened. So when you go there, there's always going to be something they want you to be concerned about. And it turns out you don't have to be concerned about any of it.
I don't think reporting on a plane crash in which 160 people die is like filler, though. Like that's like.
I'm not saying it's filler, but I'm saying like there's always something there. There's always something there. But anyway, so tell me about this plane crash.
Well, speaking of filling headlines and this plane crash, I don't know if I may have talked about this before on the podcast actually. So apologies if I have, but this did remind me of it just now. Mm-hmm. This flight that crashed was called QZ8501.
Mm-hmm.
That is a real mouthful. Not very catchy. Not very easy to remember.
Is that the flight
That's the
number?
flight designation.
Right. Okay. So it's the
That's
flight number.
it was flight QZ8501 from some place in Indonesia,
Right.
which I can't pronounce, to it was flying to Singapore,
Mm-hmm.
which I can pronounce. And that is a real mouthful, that designation, and I think that counts against it. It makes it quite a hard one. It makes it hard. It doesn't give it like an iconic name, but it does remind me of a lesson, or not a lesson, something that was told to me by a sub-editor at a newspaper when I was a new guy and some plane had crashed and we were preparing a report.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing he said to me was, "What was the plane flight number?"
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't ask, how many people have died or where was it flying to or from or what kind of plane it was. He just wanted to know the flight number. And he said that's the first thing any kind of news sub-editor asks, because straight away that becomes like the iconic thing of any crash. It was flight, What were the Malaysian ones called? MH370 or MH17. They become like the iconic things of plane crashes. And they're always the first thing the headline writers want to know, that they can start creating their page and their look. And it did strike me, this AirAsia one, QZ8501. It's just too many numbers and not a nice combination of letters. And people won't remember that one for that reason.
Yeah, but isn't this the point at which news organizations are supposed to brand it with some version of their own?
Yeah,
calling it so the the
yeah.
AirAsia Crashtastrophe, and then they keep calling it the Crashtastrophe.
Well,
Like, everybody likes to give it their own name.
Well, yeah.
It's like,
you don't work in newspapers, but
this is the snowpocalypse, right? And then we don't just
you're
say,
right. It needs, or it needs like a town, like Lockerbie or something like that, or it needs a
right.
And this one is lacking. We don't know much about it yet, but it is lacking that. It's lacking a kind of a.
Yeah. So I'm terribly sorry for newspaper writers the world over that this crash is not more sexy from a marketing perspective for them. My heart breaks open for their more difficult job.
You are a sympathetic man. So thank you, as usual. Thank you to everyone who tweeted me as soon as a crash happens. I feel like this kind of merchant of death now, that everyone wants to tweet as soon as people die, and it's certainly not a situation I hope to create. But I am still interested in plane crashes, and I do. I certainly find out about these things even quicker than I ever imagined possible, thanks to a combination of Twitter and my reputation for being interested in plane crashes.
There you go.
Yeah. I wonder how many people think like a plane crashes and they're like, oh, I must tweet that guy with the Aussie accent from Hello Internet and tell him, because...
But you must know, you get all those tweets.
Yeah.
If anybody knows how many people
I don't need one
think
to do
that,
it. I am
you are the one person
I have
knows.
the data. I'll go and do an analysis. All right. Anyway, enough. And on that light-hearted note, that's the end of Plane Crash Corner. We actually haven't done follow-up from the
we haven't done
from our
follow-up,
Christmas special. Our bumper Christmas special, our longest podcast yet.
Oh, yes, that was very long. That was a long editing job, I'm not going to lie.
And for people who want to see what a long editing job it was, you actually posted a video on your second channel.
Oh, yes.
Showing you doing the edit. Now, a normal person would have sped that video up so people could watch you do the edit quite quickly.
I did speed it up.
Really? Then how come the videos are bloomin' hour long?
Well, the video is an hour, 5 minutes long, but it's playing at 10x. It's 10 times faster than I was doing it. You didn't even watch the video. If you think I can edit that quickly, boy.
Of course I watched the video. I was making a little jokey. I was basically, or actually no, I didn't watch the whole video, but I have watched parts of it. But
I wonder if anybody watched the whole video.
You could have 20 times it and made it half an hour long and not lost that much info.
Well, I was actually playing around with it, and when you time-lapse stuff, like I've done this before with a couple of video games I put up of time-lapse stuff. It's a delicate balance between having it go quickly and having it go so quickly that you don't get any sense of what's happening at all.
Yeah,
and
fair enough.
I found that I think because of the way, I don't know how to describe this, but because I'm using a lot of keyboard commands and from watching a screen, stuff just seems to cut out and move. It jumps around very quickly when I'm editing stuff.
Yeah.
I found that 10x was as fast as it could go before it just became incomprehensible.
See, I have posted videos before of myself editing films, and I've always made them much quicker, like in 1 or 2 minutes long. And I guess what I was just trying to achieve was just a sense of feeling, a sense of how big a job it is and what some of the things that happen are. But it seems like you had a different agenda in a way. You almost wanted people to be able to follow individual actions to some extent and get a little bit more of a fine-grained idea of what you were doing. Like you were almost not quite a tutorial, of course.
No,
but you wanted to convey a lot more information than I certainly ever did.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, because I do get lots of people asking me what the editing is like, and I thought, it'd be better to send something like this so somebody can see. And I do 3 cuts of the show. I do a very rough first cut. The one that takes forever is the second cut, which I think of as the precision cut. And then a third final one where I'm making the show notes and listening for errors. I think it's kind of good to be able to send people a link, and particularly on YouTube, because you can start the video at any time, send them a link to the second cut so people can get a good sense in just a minute or two of watching that second part of how much editing happens. So yes, I didn't want it to just all zoom by in a minute and all you get is a sense of like, oh God, so many things happen. I was trying to make it as fast as possible, but you can still make out individual actions and see what's going on. So it is slightly more informative for people who might intensely care about that stuff. I did get a lot of feedback from people saying I spend way too much time editing it, but that's as long as it takes for me to do.
As I said, I didn't watch it all because it's an hour long.
Yeah.
But I did find it interesting myself as well. So I'm sure people who are really into the podcast will like dipping into that. And I know some people have watched it in its entirety because they said so in the comments.
I'm not sure I believe that. I'm not sure who can actually watch an hour's worth of that. But anyway, so that is there from the last show. There's a new sponsor for Hello Internet this month, and that is LootCrate.com. Loot Crate is a monthly subscription box service for geek and gamer items and pop culture gear. What does that mean? For less than $20 a month, they send you a box. It's like a present in the mail. Inside the box, you get 6 to 8 little presents. It might be gamer gear, it might be apparel, it might be unique one-of-a-kind items. With the start of 2015, they are celebrating geek culture with gaming icons of the past. Join Lootbox as they rewind to give you exclusive items from Star Wars and Voltron. Now, if you want the Star Wars and Voltron box, you have until the 19th at 9 Pacific Standard Time to subscribe and receive that month's crate. To do so, go over to lootcrate.com/hello and enter the code HELLO to save 10% on any new subscription. Now, if you miss the 19th cutoff, that is just for the Star Wars/Voltron box, but you never know what you're going to get. Maybe it's Marvel stuff, maybe it's stuff from The Walking Dead, maybe it's The Legend of Zelda. You just don't know what it's going to be. But basically, Loot Crate is like getting a present in the mail every month. Once again, go check it out at lootcrate.com/hello to get 10% off any subscription, and they ship to 9 countries, including the UK and Germany, and yes, even exotic Canada and others. So go check them out, and thanks to lootcrate.com for supporting Hello Internet. Are you okay with your phone? Because I can hear your phone going off in the background.
Well, it was on
there.
silent, but it just
it wasn't. But silent isn't silent. Silent is vibrate, and then you have it on the table, so I can hear your phone. I can hear it distracting you. You slow down.
Hang on a second, then. Let's stop follow up for a minute, then, because you did tell me earlier today, and we didn't put it on our list of things to do, but I was interested in it. You did want to talk about instant messaging and text etiquette, and that I want to talk about that. So let's talk about that right now.
Let's do this now, then.
Using my phone going off as the cue, and I'm now going to take my phone and throw it away onto the bed of the hotel room that I am in at the moment doing this podcast. Hang on.
Well, before this goes any further, I am terrified at this moment because I know that my phone and my iPad are somewhere in my office right now, but I haven't been able to get them to turn on Do Not Disturb mode, and so of course now I'm worried that they're going to start messaging me.
If I hadn't just thrown my phone away, I'd text you right now.
I know that you would. But my office is a total mess because I was just redoing everything, so I don't know where they are easily, and so now I am worried but this is going to be looming over me while we're having this conversation about.
Well, don't worry, because I wouldn't be too bothered by it. I would forgive you.
Okay.
What did you want to talk about texting?
One of the things that I have found recently, this has just been on my mind. I have people who I would instant message with who are in different time zones than me.
Yes.
So, and mostly it's people in America, but sometimes it's people in Australia, or it's people who I don't even know where they are in the world because they travel a lot.
Yeah.
And so when I look at my list of people I'm instant messaging with, there is a non-zero amount of uncertainty about what the heck the time is, where these people even are.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's also just the question of, are they awake or are they not? And I feel like I need to come to a decision, which is, can you message people when you think that they may be asleep in their time zone?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, let me start with my overall answer
Uh-huh.
and then break it down a bit. My answer is no, you should not text someone when you think they are asleep.
Okay.
I think that is bad manners.
Okay.
This, of course, we are only talking here about SMS messages and by extension iMessage. None of this applies to email or direct messaging on social media and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about people's phone.
Yeah, two person's phone.
Yeah.
And for me in particular, this is an iMessage question because everybody I know uses an iPhone. But I think the conversation is broad enough. I presume that Android devices work in a similar way.
In my head, I would never message someone before 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and probably after 10 p.m., depending on who they are.
Right.
9 p.m. or, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 8 p.m. even, depending on my relationship with the person. But
Right.
no one after 10 p.m.
Right.
I assume after 10 p.m. there's a good chance someone is in bed.
Right.
And 9 a.m., before 9 a.m., I think of as the personal time as well. I was told I was wrong about that the other day, though. I got a text message the other day at 7:30 in the morning from someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asleep because I'm asleep at that time. And I was outraged. And I said to my wife, can you believe it? Can you believe someone sent a text message at 7:30 a.m.? And I was told that was stupid. And I was living in fairyland because I live in a world where I get up at 9 a.m. and start editing in my pajamas.
Well,
And I don't realize that most people are up at 7:30 a.m. So my wife admonished me for that and told me, so maybe my 9 a.m. time is a little bit, it reflects my lifestyle too much. But whatever the exact time is, before a certain time of morning, you should not text someone. And after a certain time in the evening, you should not text someone.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. Just a little thing here. Your conversation with your wife reminds me of perhaps one of my top 3 favorite comedies ever is Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David. Have you seen Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I've not watched a lot of it, but I am very familiar with it.
It is worth watching all the way through. I absolutely adore that show. But there is a running gag throughout the show about the acceptable cutoff time to call someone. And this is the fundamental problem that you just ran into, is there is no universal agreement on this, but everybody kind of feels like whatever their time is, that is the universal time. So your 9 a.m. is like, of course, not before 9 a.m., but not everybody agrees with you. But
9 a.m. is very safe because 9 a.m. is a traditional start time for work.
Yes. But for you, when you say 10 p.m., for me, I feel like, 10 p.m. is way too late.
Yeah, that's why it changes. That's why it changes. But I think like people with kids and stuff, I would never text that late. But yeah, I mean that the nighttime one is harder.
Yeah. So immediately we run into this issue where there is no agreement.
There is some agreement. Like no one would think after 10 p.m. is acceptable. I believe, unless it was a bosom friend.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah. It depends on the person.
And I think no one would think before 7 a.m. was acceptable.
Yeah, again, it depends.
No, unless you know the person and you know they're awake.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just a general person who, I think 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. are the absolute limits.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's more, I personally would not go outside the 9 a.m., 10 p.m. window.
Okay. Well, regardless of the specifics, which can never be nailed down with absolute
Although
certainty.
We are trying by the sounds of it.
It doesn't. You can try as much as you want. It doesn't matter because you can't. This is like you can say with 95% certainty that a person will agree, but there's always going to be 5% of people who don't agree. They go, of course, until midnight, it's totally fine. There's always going to be someone who disagrees. Here's why I wanted to talk about this, because I feel really conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
I feel partly like you, which is this is like the stance that I have had for a long time is the same thing about trying to be very conscious of where is the other person, what time is it for them, and to not message outside of 95% certainty intervals. But here's the thing, like as time has gone on, I feel myself wanting to shift. And the reason that I want to shift to you can just message anybody at any time is because the technology has changed. So I think I'm still very much thinking of instant message in the same way that I would think of as calling someone's landline phone, right? Where I am old enough and you are old enough that we lived in a world where people would call the landline telephone and it would ring in the house. And this is where this whole notion of, oh, don't call people after or before certain times starts to come from. But it's different when you transition to personal devices as opposed to a house phone. And then what I think is the really big deal, and why I was mentioning Apple in particular, is because the iPhone has all of these options for letting a person determine how they wish to receive their communications. And the biggest deal with this is the auto do not disturb mode, which we've touched upon in the past, but where a person can tell the phone, don't ring or buzz or do anything, and they get to set whatever they think are their own acceptable hours. What I'm starting to think about is, can I assume that enough people know how to use their own phones that it is perfectly fine to message people when you would assume that they would be asleep, because you can also assume they have decided how they wish to receive communications. And presumably they have do not disturb mode on their phone when they go to bed. And so then when they get up in the morning, they just see it. This is what I'm feeling conflicted about.
All right. I'm not having that.
Okay. Why are you not having that? Well, actually, can I want to mention one specific scenario before we go forward?
You go ahead.
So my specific scenario is people in America message me when I am asleep.
Yeah, that happens to me too.
Right? And so, right, because we are in the best time zone in the world, in the UK. I absolutely love it, as I have mentioned very many times. It is super convenient for everything. Right? But somebody living in the worst time zone in the world, California, messages me from their perspective in the evening, but it's, 3 a.m. in London. So then when I get up in the morning, I see the message from them, and maybe it's a question. Maybe they want to know something from me. And this is where I feel particularly conflicted is, okay, I was asleep and they messaged me. And it was obviously no problem because I know how to use my phone. But now it's 8 a.m. and I'm looking at my phone and they have some question. Can I message them back? Even though I know because they're in a terrible time zone, they're almost certainly asleep right now. I feel like the answer to that question is yes. I can message them back at that point, even though I'm almost certain that they are asleep. What do you think about this?
I think my phone just went off on the bed as you said that. I understand, right? I understand what you're saying. But here's the problem.
Okay.
We're all spread all over the world.
Right.
My family live in Australia.
Right.
Some members of my family are very sick at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Some members of my family in the UK, as you know, are very sick at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Things can happen at weird times. Who knows when something terrible is going to happen? Something predicted or something unpredicted? Who knows if someone you love is going to, in the middle of the night in another country, be in a car crash? Mm-hmm. Something you want to know about straight away. People need to be able to contact me and wake me up. And I want to be woken up. You know, this is a good thing about technology, that if something happens in Australia that I want to know about and it's 4 a.m,
mm-hmm.
I will wake up and I will put on my trousers and get in a car and go to Heathrow and get to Australia if I have to, as quick as I can. I want that option.
Mm-hmm.
If something happens in the UK in the middle of the night, I want people to be able to call me.
Right.
Now, I know you can fine-tune all your settings so this call can get through and this person can get through and this person can't. But who's going to be the person that calls me or texts me when something unforeseen happens? I don't know. What if the person who I think should call me is the one something's happened to and someone else is trying to call on their behalf? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I would rather depend on people's good manners and them knowing what counts as important and not important, rather than depending on a bunch of filters and technologies I set up to decide what's important and not important.
Mm-hmm.
And if the price I pay is occasionally getting a text in the middle of the night from someone who was a bit inconsiderate, well, maybe I'll pay that for a while longer. But I think I don't want to live in a world where I'm uncontactable. Especially at this time, especially at the moment, especially as, the people I love and care about are getting a bit older, and I never know when that call's going to come. And, and my phone goes off in the middle of the night, and I sometimes think it's going to be one of those calls, and then I look down and it's just some jokey text from a mate. Okay, I'll deal with that. I don't like it, but I'll deal with it. And, but I don't know a way around it, and I don't feel comfortable setting up filters for things I can't predict. So I don't know. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would respond to that in that you can set settings differently for instant messages and phone calls. And I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but there is this communication hierarchy. And for me, a phone call is at the top of the communication hierarchy. Right?
Yes,
Whoever else is calling you demands your attention right now. And
yeah,
almost everybody.
So you're saying You're saying SMSs have moved in the hierarchy almost into email territory.
Well, I would say SMS is above email and below phone call, and precisely where
it's always been there though, Gray. It's always been between those two.
Yes,
but you're saying it's moving closer to email.
I disagree with that. I mean, for me, I would say iMessage is one step below phone calls. But phone calls are, for me, I always, like, almost nobody in my life calls me. And I'm very aware that I treat a phone call like it's an emergency, which is one of the reasons why you occasionally call me. And I always feel like, oh, Christ, there must be some problem. Oh, no, you're just on the road and you want to talk about something. But my response whenever anybody calls me is, there must be some problem right now.
That's fair enough. Even I feel like life is moving that way a bit.
Yeah, my wife knows. She does not call me very often, but when she does, she has some phrase, but she hates it when I answer because she can tell I am in basically triage mode as soon as I pick up the phone. Okay, how urgent is the problem that is about to be presented to me? Oh, it's no problem at all. She's just at the grocery store and her hands are full. So she told Siri to call me so she can ask me about something. It's no problem at all. But she hates those first few seconds where she can tell. I'm like, right, do I need to drop everything immediately and run? And it is impossible for me to not react to a phone call in this way. Mainly because they are so rare.
Yeah.
But this is the trouble of the modern world, right? There are so many different ways to contact people. It's hard to know how other people arrange their own communication protocols.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that is very, very difficult. And this is partly why, like, I feel like as you get an increasingly large number of ways to communicate with someone, and as the uncertainty around all of these different methods increases, the only rational solution to this is to assume that the other person has arranged it in whatever way is optimal to them. And so that the notion of trying to project yourself into the mind of the other person is more and more of an impossibility. You can't know their preferences. So just use whatever you're going to do and assume that the other person is receiving it in the way that they wish to receive it. That's kind of my thought.
The problem is, though, that there are some people in my life who treat SMS messages incredibly casually.
Right.
Like, they'll use them just to send, group jokes or something.
Right.
And there are other people who I think would convey very serious, important information to me by SMS rather than phoning me.
Right.
Or say something really serious has happened. Can you give me a call when you have the chance, out of some weird politeness?
Right.
So, and I don't know who's going to do what and when in that way. So I think SMSs are still reasonably sacred, and it was better when they were only attached to your mobile phone number for that reason, because fewer people have my mobile phone number, only a selected group. Right. Now that people can send SMSs to you if they have your email address, and that, it has gotten a bit stickier, but I think it's pretty safe for you to assume. I know there are ways around all these problems I'm raising. And you could say, well, you could apply this rule to this person and that rule to that person and do all that. And you're saying, should I assume people have that degree of skill? I think you can pretty safely assume they don't. I think you can pretty safely assume you are one of the few people who would be able to control your incoming and outgoing communications to that fine-grained level of detail.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, and this is why I think it's kind of a conflict, because this going back to one of our previous discussions, we mentioned how almost nobody changes the default settings on anything. Like software developers know this. And so, yes, I am pretty certain, because I am very, very fiddly about my contactable settings. I go in and flip all those switches about who's going to cause it to ring, under what circumstances, and if I don't know the person, just mute and block them forever. I don't even want to hear about it, and dump all the voicemails into the garbage immediately. I do fiddle with all of that stuff. And I am also aware that, yes, I should probably assume that most people don't.
Yes.
But at the same time, I feel like I can't be the only person who's wondering about times to send text messages. And I feel like if someone is going to change anything on their phone, I feel like the do not disturb settings would be one of those things. Or,
well, definitely not for me.
Well, I guess
I do not believe in the do not disturb because of that scenario I laid out. I don't use it at this stage of life.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. Right, is like the emergency phone call in the middle of the night scenario is an interesting one, right? And it is the one reason why a person may choose to leave on their phone at all the time. Now, I have done my best with the settings so that the right people can theoretically contact me in an emergency. But I do know that, like, once you set up filters, there are ways this can go wrong, where a person wants to get in touch with you and they can't, even though it's an emergency. And I take the other approach to this, which is, well, I'm going to accept the damage in these rare cases. But everybody's scenario, everybody's personal situation is different. And once again, you don't know what the situation is of anybody you're trying to contact. Yeah. So this is why I've been knocking this around in my brain, and I'm gonna lay someone on the line here in particular, and his name is Destin from Smarter Every Day, who is a particular
Smarter Every Day texter every minute.
Because I know he doesn't seem to sleep. I feel like he's almost certainly awake at any point in time, but it is tricky. And I'm just letting Destin, if you're listening, I'm just laying it on the line now. I'm going to start messaging you back whenever, and you better have figured it out on your phone, because you in particular, if you message me, I see it in the morning, I'm just going to message it back.
Yeah.
And also
he does text at odd hours but I imagine he also keeps odd hours.
Yes.
But that's I accept that, and I'm really grateful to have friends across the world who want to contact me, so I'll pay the price.
Oh yeah.
Getting odd text at a weird time, but
I agree. Like iMessage for me is relatively sacred, and the number of people I have on there is few, precisely because it is important. So it's like, I have family, I have a few friends, I have the people from Random Acts of Intelligence, like all you guys, like you can message me whenever, like that's totally cool. But it does still, because people are spread out, I find this uncertainty is large about.
You know what will happen now though? Destin's either going to get really hurt and like hardly ever text us again, or he's going to get really excited and start texting us at 4 a.m. like all the time.
He can text at 4 a.m. My phone will just sit there in absolute silence until I see it in the morning.
See, if my phone goes off in the middle of the night, I now realise either someone in Australia is dead, or Destin wants to send me a picture of some food or something.
Perfect. That's the kind of random reinforcement that you want, right? Maybe it's a huge deal, but maybe it's not a big problem. So it's like, for you, iMessage is like the phone calls for me, where I feel like, I'm assuming it's an emergency. Oh, it's not an emergency? Okay, well, that was a tiny moment of panic for no benefit whatsoever. I agree with you, but I find myself more and more sliding towards the default opinion that, like, other people know how to use their phones, and I'm just going to assume that that's the case. And even if I'm pretty sure the person's asleep, I think it's okay to message them back if they asked me some question at an odd hour and I didn't see it until later. But I don't know. I would be genuinely curious to see people's thoughts on this in the Reddit, because I feel like this is a social acceptance thing.
You are raising it in a different context, which does, I see, create a greater dilemma. And that is you're replying to messages.
Yes.
You're not sitting there thinking, I'd love to send Brady a text. Is now an appropriate time? You're switching your phone on. Suddenly a whole bunch of old texts are coming through from the dark period. And now you've got to reply to them all. And you're strategically thinking, at what time can I reply to what one? Yeah, and that does put you in a difficult position, and I have some sympathy with that.
That's a good point, and it's because, as I've mentioned before, my do not disturb period ends. I think I currently have it set now at 1 p.m.
You're joking. So a text won't get to you until 1 p.m. if I send it in the morning?
Most of the time, not. So I have my do not disturb kicks on at 9 p.m. and I think does not end. I'm always fiddling with it, whether it's going to be noon or 1 p.m. the next day, but it's always one of those two.
What if I need to contact you in an emergency?
Well, then you can call me.
When am I blocked from phoning you?
I don't know. I'm not sure if you're on my special person list. I'd have to look at that.
Well, look at it now.
I told you I don't know where my phone is right now.
You must know if I'm on it.
I don't actually know. What do you need? What do you need to call me for anyway?
I don't know. What if I need your advice on a piece of technology I want to buy?
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. I feel like, but we've done this. This always happens to be in the afternoon. To tie this back to our previous conversation, this little habit of mine is one of the things that I did instill after the quarterly reviews. Is that I noticed that it's like I've got to protect my mornings from any kind of distraction whatsoever, and Brady can be a distraction sometimes, and so or like messages are just a distraction, and so I don't want to see anything come through until the afternoon. And I'm totally aware, like in the afternoon, I rarely get any kind of useful work done between maybe 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. That is just a dead zone of nothing good gets done. And so that's a perfect time for messages to come through to me or to look at email or something like that. So that's why it's this great window of opportunity for me. But
you really know how to make me feel very, very unspecial sometimes.
Brady, you are one of the most special people in my life.
Yeah, as long as it's between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I need to hear from you immediately in the morning.
I would never text you before 9 a.m.
Okay, I don't doubt that. But here, let's get back on track.
I tell you what, we're making a right old mess of this for those handful of superfans that make those really cool mind maps of these episodes.
Yes.
And graph them out. This graph is going to be a complete mess. You just back reference to an earlier conversation.
This is going to be a total mess.
And we haven't finished follow up.
We didn't even start it. We started it and then
we did one. We did one item follow up.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, flowchart makers of the show. This is not very helpful. Just to wrap this up, you are right that precisely because I know how to handle the do not disturb settings on my phone and some other contact settings, I end up causing for myself much more of a problem because I'm always seeing messages being time shifted from other people. So this problem is a little bit self-generating, but I still think that it is equally applicable for something has popped into your head and you want to send it to somebody. Do you keep an eye on whether or not they are asleep or they aren't? For the people who I instant message with and who I have open instant message invitations to, that is higher up on my priority queue than something like email. So people email me, it might be 2 weeks before I get back to you, but I'm probably going to reply to an iMessage, within 12 hours maybe of receiving it. So that's why they're just different. They're different protocols.
This crazy short window that you've made in which people can possibly contact you.
It works for me.
Don't you miss
No, whatever you're about to say, the answer is no. Don't you miss? No, I obviously don't. What is it? What do I miss?
Just spontaneity and unexpectedness,
But I have a window for my spontaneity.
Sometimes it's nice to just get a funny joke from someone when you weren't expecting it, or a nice surprise, or just a break from the drudgery of something. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that call at that time.
Yeah,
or...
my communications are spontaneous and random between 1 p.m. and 9 p.m.
All right.
Randomness is great, but you need to put it in a box.
Shall we resume follow-up?
Let's knock off a couple things quickly.
Okay.
And then
You've
we'll
put
try to
something
wrap
in
it
here about Futian?
I think it's Futian Port. Someone on the Reddit who either lived in Hong Kong or lived in Shenzhen pointed out that this is almost certainly the bridge that I was talking about last episode when I mentioned crossing from Hong Kong into China, but I wasn't sure where it was and I wasn't sure what bridge it was. And looking at these pictures, I feel like, yes, almost certainly this is where I crossed. And I was going from Hong Kong into Shenzhen. And as you can see from the photographs, it is a weird bridge because it really does look like an airport terminal on the inside.
And speaking of bridges, lots of people have been submitting their own lists of 5 bridges. Some people have even written their own blogs and things like that of their 5 favourite bridges after we did likewise. And can I just say, I've really enjoyed it. And thank you to the people that have gone to that trouble. It's
You were looking forward to bridge follow-up. I remember you said that in the show.
Yeah, like most people, I'm a bit cynical about lists and list videos and clickbaits and 13 celebrities who look good naked and all this sort of stuff and all this sort of thing. But there is still something from your childhood about making lists that's pretty cool. I remember when I was a little boy, I used to love buying a notebook, and it would be like my top 5 notebook, and it would be my top 5 of everything, my top 5 favourite colours and my top 5 favourite cricketers and my top 5 favourite flavours of ice cream. And I do like making top 5s, kind of a high fidelity style thing. Like making lists is good, as long as it's not done in a clickbaity way. So thank you to those people that have got in the spirit of making your 5 bridges.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed those.
We spoke about The Hobbit last episode, and I talked about how I was making a few notes on my phone.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of people were outraged that my phone was switched on in the cinema. Mm-hmm. Can I just say, that's fair enough. I am also very opposed to people having their phones on in cinema, although I don't know where that puts me on my people trying to contact me in emergency position, but I don't believe you should have your phone on in the cinema. I think this was a very special case because I was seeing this film for work. I deliberately sat away from people so I wouldn't distract them. Mm-hmm. It was the only way I could really make notes because I wasn't organised enough to have paper and pen. And I knew it was going to be a rubbish film, so I didn't feel so bad about it. But in general, you are right. Having a phone on in the cinema is very, very bad. I probably shouldn't have done it, considering I ended up losing the notes and the notes were pointless anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing that really breaks my heart.
Yeah, I especially shouldn't have done it. But I just want to kind of, in some ways, take a bit of a, mea culpa and fair dues. I shouldn't have done it, but there were extenuating circumstances, and I've heard you. The people have spoken, and I do agree with them.
To put it on the record, I also used my phone to take notes when I was watching The Hobbit. But I specifically, in my first class movie watching experience, which we discussed last time, which I've been trying to sell to everyone I meet now when the topic of movies has come up. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people I know in my life asking about the separate movie theater experience. And I'm like, oh, you have to do this. If you are ever going to go through the hell of watching a movie in public, you need to do the upgraded movie experience.
I feel like you're so late to the party, though. It's like you're some guy who's just said, do you know what? There's this stand outside the cinema where you can also buy drinks and food before you go in. I never even knew it was there.
Maybe.
It's like, these have been around for ages, these things.
Maybe. I am really late. There's something else. Well, I'll talk about being late to the party on something else another time. I finally just listened to Serial, which everybody's been talking about for the longest time.
Oh, yeah, I haven't listened to that yet. Yeah.
No, but these things are very slow to enter my media consumption queue with the way I have things algorithmically laid out. But anyway, so I've been pushing the movies on everybody. But one of the other things that was great about it is you can reserve a seat. And so I specifically reserved the back corner seat so that when I had my phone on, there was nobody behind me to be distracted.
Wow.
And so
you really do plan ahead, don't you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you don't just show up, and the phone is really rude and distracting to other people. Brady, it's like, oh, sorry, folks, I'm here for work. You yell at everybody in the theater. I don't,
I was discreet, but it's still a fair criticism. And as I said, I was away from people too, but.
But anyway, so I just wanted to put it on the record there. I also used my phone to take notes.
So I think that is it for follow-up.
Yeah.
We've finished the follow-up, and nearly an hour and a half in, with more than a few tangents. There's a few things I was going to bring up, but I'll skip some of them for another time because we did say we were going to have a shorter show, but there were a
Yeah.
couple of things I wanted to quickly bring up.
It has to be a shorter show, but do you want to mention the objectivity?
I would like to mention that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm starting a new channel.
If there's one thing you need, Brady, it is more channels.
It is a new channel for the new year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a series of videos called Objectivity, which Gray will link to in the show notes. It's not very easy to find at the moment. I'll put a link on my website, which is bradyharron.com, but Gray will put something in the show notes, which will be a better way to find it because you already, hopefully, are somewhere near them. But it has been a problem naming it because of names and search engine stuff, and it's early days, but it's going to be a bunch of videos about objects. And you and I have discussed this for a while, actually. You've known a bit about this as I've been.
I feel like I've been very interested in this project because you've been telling me about this for a while. So I feel like I have known a little secret long before anybody else, which is surprisingly fun. And we've talked about it a little bit. And I am very interested to see how this channel turns out because particularly I think the thing that may be interesting to people is that this is going to be much more you in the videos than other stuff like periodic videos or number file.
Yeah.
So I am very curious to see how this turns out and how you do this. But you're going to be talking about objects and historical objects, which I could not imagine a more Brady channel than perhaps this one.
But it's in some ways it's kind of you as well because it's going to be like in, vaults and archives and things like that and cool stuff. And while you don't like objects and tat and stuff in your house, you are really interested in sort of history and the stories of things and that, and there's going to be a bit of that. So I think you'll like it too. So
well, I'm very curious to see the first few videos.
Yeah, well, there's like a little teaser video already on the channel that went up in December, and within a day or two, hopefully, of the podcast going up, the first proper video about an object will also go up. I won't give away what it is yet, but it's something really, really cool.
Oh. Will you tell me offline? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I'll tell you offline. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So that should be up soon. So go and have a look. Do me a favor, and if you like the channel, subscribe to it. And if you don't, just kind of keep your mouth shut and walk away quietly. Don't leave a negative comment or tell everyone how bad it is. Just kind of.
I like your honesty there. That's good. If you don't like it, you know what? Keep walking.
That's pretty much what Gray does when I make a video he doesn't like. He just doesn't say anything. So anyway, that's going to be something new and different. But it's being filmed and edited by a mate of mine called James Hennessy, who's very talented. And so the films will look a lot prettier than my films. But the prettiness of his filming will be cancelled out by the occasional appearance of my face. So, but
yes, because you're just hideous, Brady, hideous.
Yeah. But it's going to be interesting. So, digging out all this. For years, I've been going into all these vaults and archives and things like that for various purposes. And every time you go in there, there's like 1,000 things that you look at and you think, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff here. I should be making a video about all of this stuff. So Objectivity is a little taste or attempt at that, at just taking these disparate, random, amazing things and making films about them. And I think there will be quite a science bent to it, because it's me. So they'll mostly be cool objects from the history of science and discovery in the natural world and whatnot. And I hope to visit various places and have different people in the videos, and we'll see how it goes. It could be a short experiment. It'll be 6 months at least, and at the end of 6 months, I think we'll see whether or not it's worked or whether or not it's been a spectacular disaster.
Yeah, but this is I'm a big fan of this stuff. You try little experiments, you see how they go.
Yeah,
the ones that work, you keep going, and the ones that don't, you kill.
This is true. Sometimes the ones that work, you kill as well.
That's true.
That's
they don't work well enough.
Times. That's happened to me a few times. I've started a couple of channels that have been started growing, and people have wanted more, but for reasons of time or resources and that, I've had to kind of stop. And I still get emails saying, "Oh, when are you going to do more?" Psychology channel or more of that philosophy channel, and I want to and I can't, but so who knows? Some stopping doesn't always mean they failed, but failing does mean they stop.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So so thank you for giving me a little ad there.
I'm going to charge you the normal rates for that ad, by the way.
rather than ending on a shameless promotion, I'd like to end on something more pointless, because that is the spirit of Hello Internet. And let's go back to mobile phones.
Okay.
Where do you stand on kisses at the end of text messages?
What?
Do you put kisses on the end of text messages, like an X, if you're texting Mrs.
What?
Gray? I'm assuming we'll keep it to Mrs. Gray at the moment, I hope. But like, do you put kisses on the end of messages, or?
No, I don't do this. Do you put kisses at the? I've never gotten a kiss from you at the end of your text messages.
No, of course I don't put a kiss on the end of a.
Well, you're asking me if I put kisses on the end of text messages, and then the answer is no, I don't.
No, what about to your wife?
I use emoticons with my wife much more than other people. Is that what you're asking?
Does she sign off her text to you with a kiss?
You mean with an X? Is that what
with
you're
an
asking
X,
me?
Yes.
No,
yes.
not with an X. No.
Anyway, the reason I bring it up is I think this isn't going to mean a lot to you, because you're obviously, I think you're outside the norm here, but I think we are suffering from a kiss inflation on text messages, because as I said, I sign off my text messages to my wife with an X and a 0, so like an O, like a kiss and a hug. Not many people do use the hug. It's kind of a bit of a thing for me, but
you're a huggy person on instant message.
I just think
I've never gotten a hug from you on instant message.
think I don't do it to
mainly
friends.
I'm just feeling upset now.
All right, I'll say. Well, I wouldn't know why I'd bother. You won't get it till 1 p.m. anyway. But the hug moment has gone by the time the text gets to you. My mood may have changed. But anyway, you're not with me on this whole kiss inflation thing, are you?
Well, I'm totally unfamiliar with this world, and I don't think I would ever be counting the kisses that somebody, like, that's just craziness.
I feel like we live in completely different worlds sometimes. Like, I'm not saying kisses on the end of text messages are important. Clearly, they are not.
I'm gonna send you a set number of kisses at the end of all of our text messages.
But that would be useful, because then when you detracted or added from them...
That's what I'm saying. So yeah, if I only send you 2 kisses in the future, you will know that I'm mad with you, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like this to be added to our communication? Because I'm going to have to make some macro that just auto adds the 4 kisses at the end of each, because I'm not going to type that out.
But that's what I mean. There is this inflation. They're becoming meaningless. I think at some stage, 2 kisses became the norm, and then all of a sudden 1 kiss wasn't enough. And then
the only thing I can relate this to is the old eBay feedback that had plus inflation. So people would say A+++++, would buy again. That's the only thing I can relate this to. And the people are like, oh, they only got an A+. They must be a terrible eBayer, because 10 pluses are the standard now for eBay.
Well, this is exactly what's happened. And it happens with the way schools are rated and stuff too, doesn't it? Like, everyone's, and school marks, suddenly you had to get an A star to be good, and then getting an A wasn't what it used to be.
And I don't even know if it's happened. People will have to tell me. But when I was leaving teaching, there was talk that they were going to be introducing the A double star mark. So it was basically the beginning of an infinite number of stars to represent how awesome you are. But yeah, so they decided that apparently A star was not high enough, and one of the boards was going to be, we're going to introduce A double star for the really exceptional students. It's like, you don't need to do this. I guess that's what's going on here. Kiss inflation is dumb.
I like it. I think it's a really interesting... Like, I can imagine someone writing quite an interesting little article about it. And you made a brilliant parallel with the A++ inflation on eBay. Like, that's a really interesting observation.
I'm sure that's a good go-to metaphor the kids these days will really be right on top of. Remember eBay in the 90s, kids? Yeah, that's exactly what this is like.
Yeah, but it all happens. I just find it interesting. I find it interesting that, one or 2 kisses is just is nothing. The kisses are dropping in value.
Okay, well, I gotta go, Brady. XX.